a couple of things that I've been feeling really inspired to talk about lately. And one of them is essentially reflecting on my experience with tobacco and nicotine when I was younger, and really looking more candidly on some advice that I would give myself, and in turn have offered to others in the course of the last 2-3 weeks, about things I wish I really knew when I was participating within nicotine and also transitioning out of nicotine. Now, the first piece of this is really beginning to understand, really fundamentally, what my body is lacking or is deficient within. And understanding how, if I'm, say, participating within nicotine or any sort of compound that is altering your neurochemical state, it is very vital to really see the means of how this essentially, for lack of a better word, glosses over what you may be experiencing and what your body is lacking, the nutrients that you're maybe deficient within. And when you begin to maybe introduce this conscious awareness, like, all right, maybe, you've been smoking cigarettes all day, or introducing some sort of compound where you've been out, really hyperstimulating yourself, and you've begun to notice that you are maybe very much lacking B12, or lacking a variety of B vitamins. Maybe you haven't introduced any sort of food, which goes hand in hand with the means of how these compounds naturally suppress the appetite. Maybe you're very naturally deficient in zinc. Maybe over the course of days you've been deficient within magnesium or various other nutrients. The very means of exploring and very openly asking yourself, introducing this awareness to what sort of nutrients you are deficient in. I really think this is an extremely important thing to introduce as you are even just actively participating within these compounds, but also when you're now transitioning out of these things and realizing now to what degree are you really deficient and lacking with certain things, so you can really allow yourself to really, I'd say, strengthen your foundation when you're making these intensive shifts. Now, the second part of this that I feel is extremely important, and I remember realizing this within about a week as I transitioned out of cigarettes. Now, this is understanding the importance of an optimally functioning thyroid. Now, I remember researching this, and there's various things that come into play and really begin to impact the thyroid in various ways. But nicotine, arsenic, tobacco, all these dimensions of what's in a cigarette when you're introducing this does alter the thyroid. This really does impact more so the thyroid hormones that are circulating through your body. So when you begin to take a step back and educate yourself on what thyroid hormones are, what allow these to really optimally function, understanding what selenium is, what iodine is, and the balance that is required to successfully have your thyroid function optimally. Really beginning to understand what things inhibit the thyroid, things like processed foods, things like radiation. There's so many environmental factors that really impact the way that our thyroid functions. Just giving yourself this means to introduce this awareness, educate yourself on what the thyroid is and how all these different ways of how you can really optimize it. This really, really powerfully allows you to root yourself within this experience. If you're actively choosing to participate within nicotine or tobacco, or as you are transitioning out of it, particularly when you're transitioning out of it. So this is what I found, very, very instantaneously. So when you're in this phase where you're now noticing very consciously your thyroid has been very compromised, this is the moment, this is the key time to now introduce awareness and educate yourself on how the thyroid functions to make this shift more seamless. So another thing that I remember myself offering some perspective on, I found myself introducing, is really understanding how you can help your body detox. Now, when you're transitioning out of something like nicotine, there's all these heavy metals that are sitting within your fat and in your body, and your system is in a rapid state of detox. Going to things like the sauna, steam room, doing intensive sort of things to allow this process to be more seamless is really paramount. Something that I noticed myself introduce right away was herbal type of detoxifications, things like cilantro and spirulina in particular. This is something that I noticed myself take quite a lot as soon as I was transitioning out of cigarettes. And the idea is that cilantro, it works to essentially, I think the word is, it chelates the heavy metals out of your system. It is essentially drawing out the toxins and the heavy metals from your system. And this works in unison with spirulina, where spirulina allows you now to rid these toxins out of your system completely. And it's extremely important to understand when you're introducing something like cilantro, it actually needs to have that other element. If you're just, say, introducing mass amounts of cilantro to detox your system, you're only partially allowing these toxins to leave your system. So the idea is, when you introduce these two in unison, they work together to allow you to rid these toxins out of your system. Now, really understand, the way that your system works. Do your own research. Begin to understand, how you respond to these and act accordingly. But this is something that I remember myself doing very consciously, and introducing large amounts of cilantro and spirulina in salads and blending them into smoothies, and really just consciously introducing this awareness on how you can begin this process of detoxification. Because again, as you're now transitioning out of cigarettes, or even as you are participating within cigarettes, you're in a rapid state of detox. And now, that being said, I think it's extremely important to understand, when you are, though, consciously introducing things like tobacco and nicotine and any sort of heavy metal in this sort of excess, I really feel it's important to not, or at least to understand, that when you're introducing cilantro and spirulina, this can actually cause a very negative effect, because you're constantly introducing these heavy metals as you're trying to now rapidly detox this. So if you are, say, still participating within nicotine, it's extremely important to be very mindful of doing this detox.